Sunday School teacher, I'm glad that you've joined us for our time of study and preparation. We're going to be working on the Bible study for Sunday, October the 7th. The title of the lesson is True Fruit. We're in Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 13. The point that we want to make in this lesson with our people, we want them walking away with this truth, and that is that evidence of a person's salvation is seen in a godly character. And so we will be discussing that truth in our Bible study. God's gift of grace carries with it a demand of having a Christ-like life. We don't just get saved and live like the world. We are to be different. Now, the way that we live does not gain us salvation, but we are told and commissioned, and we'll see this in this Bible study, that we are to live holy lives. Saved people are to live out their salvation. We're to be different. And Christians are to reflect daily God's character as revealed in Christ. Paul stressed that Christ had set believers free and intended for them to remain free. So there's that balance of living a holy life, but also understanding that our life is not what we do is not what gains us salvation. Well, let's look at these verses. Beginning in chapter 5, verse 13 is where we'll start. It says, "For you were called to be free, brothers and sisters. Only don't use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through love. For the whole law is fulfilled in one statement: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out, you will be consumed by one another." He says here that the freedom gained in Christ was not a license to do as they pleased. You're saved, but just because you're going to heaven doesn't mean you're going to live like the devil. Grace demanded a higher way of living than the law could ever require. Grace, the fact that we're forgiven and made right with God, demands that we live a different life. The love that he mentions there in verse 13 is a self-giving, sacrificial goodwill that acts in others' best interest. He says that's what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to treat each other. Put others first, not trying to get your way, but to sacrifice self. He even talks about serving one another. And the term serve that he uses there is that of a slave. The slave doing their duty, serving, being devoted. He goes on to say in verse 14 that believers were to extend love to one another and to all people that they encountered. How will they know that we are Christians? They will know that by our love. Verse 15, evidently some of the Galatian believers were not serving one another out of love. He talks about in verse 15, but if you bite, and the term bite there is to injure and to lacerate. And the picture that you get is that of a wild animal. The jaws of a alligator or a dog or something that when it bites, it intends to harm and to hurt. They're not going to eat the meal right then, but they're going to do enough damage to kill it. And so he's talking about how they're treating each other, biting at each other, using words to harm. And And then he goes on in verse 15, but to bite and devour. Again, the word bite is an animal, teeth. And then the word that he uses for devour is that of hunting down. Hunting down, to kill, and to eat. That they were doing that with each other, and that does not paint a positive picture. But he says, if you bite and devour one another, watch out, you will be consumed by one another. Basically what he's saying there is that the Christian community in Galatia could very well possibly destroy itself from within. The way they were acting, it was very possible that the force